Why should we give land to the Indians when it clearly says on the paper it belonged to the farmers?
But surely you must realize that this is their home. These indigenous tribes have been living on this land for hundreds of years.
Listen, this world is not fair. Some people win, some people lose. The whole world think they can tell Brazil what to do with her land. Sorry, no. We do what we please.
La nostra terra è sempre in movimento. Una sinfonia dinamica di forze che lavorano insieme per infondere vita nei quattro angoli del mondo. Per millenni, le culture di tutto il mondo l'hanno chiamata madre.
We live on an incredibly beautiful planet. A home that we will hopefully pass on to generations to come. But as the years go by, it's becoming increasingly hard to imagine what kind of a world we're leaving behind us. We've spent the last 4 years traveling around the world, filming the stark reality that people now face from the threat of ecological collapse. It's now become very clear to us that there's one thing driving the destruction of our ecosystems faster than anything else. Let us show you how this very same thing might just also be our salvation.
Climate and environmental scientists warn that we are fast approaching the point of no return if we don't make a substantial course reversal.
We see really serious catastrophic effects in the next few years, certainly in the next decade or two. The world will be completely different from the way it is now.
Dal 1900 assistiamo a un drammatico aumento dei disastri meteorologici in tutto il mondo. Negli ultimi 50 anni ci sono stati 4 volte più disastri meteorologici rispetto ai 100 precedenti.
We began to work together to move this issue onto the global center stage. There was a lot of discussion about the contribution from buildings and from industrial factories, but I became aware during that same period of time that there was another factor that was going undiscussed, and that is the role of animal agriculture, which I could see was playing some significant role around the planet. But this was the elephant in the room no one wanted to talk about.
Whatever environmental issue you want to look at, from species loss to water pollution to water use to climate change, animal agriculture is one of the top causes.
The critical, widespread negative impact of animal agriculture on our planet is undeniable. Severe global crises, from climate change and environmental damage to species extinction, hunger, poverty, disease, and antibiotic resistance, all of these have direct connections to animal agriculture and the massive inefficiency of our current food production systems.
Un rapporto pubblicato da Wikileaks nel 2009 espose le conversazioni tra dirigenti della Nestlé e i funzionari americani, chiamato The Tour d'Horizon. I dirigenti della Nestlé dissero che la loro ricerca aveva dimostrato che il mondo avrebbe esaurito l'acqua dolce entro i prossimi 30 anni e affermavano che la causa principale di questo disastro è la domanda globale di prodotti a base di carne.
If you look at the impact that food choice has on global warming, it's very significant. Eating meat is huge for global climate, and that's something where personal choice is the determining factor. So there's the only case I can think of where individual human choice would have a big effect would be food.
We're now over the line. And the idea that we're going to double meat production between now and 2050, this is just unsustainable. This is going to have to give. Our diet is taking us to an abyss.
A significant reason why livestock production has been having such a huge impact on greenhouse gas emissions is because of the large surfaces of forests that have been destroyed in order to make room for pastures and for the growth of soybean and maize for feedstock production.
Una volta le nostre foreste erano piene di vita. Negli ultimi anni abbiamo sviluppato un insaziabile appetito per carne e latticini e per via di questa crescente domanda servivano sempre più terreni. Così abbiamo tagliato e bruciato le foreste incontaminate, distruggendo ogni cosa per far posto agli animali che poi avremmo mangiato. A questi animali non era permesso di vagare liberi come fanno in natura e così le aree di pascolo si sono svuotate. Ma ovviamente dovevamo nutrirli. Quindi abbiamo tagliato e bruciato sempre più foreste, seminato il terreno con mais e soia geneticamente modificati, irrorandoli di pesticidi, erbicidi e fertilizzanti chimici sintetici. L'agricoltura animale ha cambiato il volto del nostro pianeta e le superfici verdi sono usate per le coltivazioni. Una grande area che attraversa il globo. La terra che usiamo per l'agricoltura animale, qui in rosso, occupa grandi quantità, una superficie di gran lunga superiore a quella usata per le coltivazioni a uso umano.
Almost all the Earth's surface now bears the mark of some kind of human impact, and most of that is livestock production.
Agriculture has transformed the planet like nothing else. To produce milk, we farm an area about the size of Brazil. To produce beef, we farm an area about the size of Canada, the United States, the whole of Central America, Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador combined. To produce eggs, we farm an area the size of Sweden. To produce aquaculture feed, an area about the size of the UK. A plant-based diet would reduce the amount of land required to produce our food by 3.1 billion hectares. That's an area the size of the entire African continent.
L'Amazzonia è la più grande foresta pluviale al mondo. Questo mondo antico e ricco di biodiversità sta venendo lentamente sostituito. Si pensa che gran parte della soia coltivata in Brasile sia destinata al consumo umano. In realtà, meno del 6% della soia coltivata al mondo è per l'alimentazione umana. La stragrande maggioranza serve a creare mangimi per animali da allevamento. La soia viene esportata in tutto il mondo e data in pasto ai miliardi di polli, pesci d'allevamento, maiali e mucche che mangiamo ogni giorno. Le foreste non solo ospitano milioni di specie di animali selvatici e piante, ma fungono anche come regolatori dell'atmosfera del pianeta. Giorno dopo giorno inspirano lentamente l'anidride carbonica e producono miliardi di tonnellate di ossigeno per la nostra aria. Ogni anno si stima una perdita di 18 milioni di acri di foresta, che è grosso modo la dimensione di Panama. Si ritiene che circa la metà delle foreste tropicali della Terra siano state distrutte. e alcuni scienziati hanno predetto che se non vengono adottate misure significative a livello mondiale, entro il 2030 resterà solo il 10% delle foreste.
One of the most precious things we have in the world is our rainforests. The rainforests are literally being chewed away by farmers who know they can make money by cutting another acre and then another acre and then another acre for meat.
Aí nosso avô, naquele tempo, cacique, então já falou, olha, você vai sofrer muito, porque o branco ruralismo.
Ogni anno centinaia di tribù indigene della foresta pluviale amazzonica vedono incendiare i loro villaggi. Sono stati forzatamente allontanati dalla loro terra e molti di loro sono stati uccisi dai paramilitari dell'agroindustria che cercano di trasformare la loro giungla in terreni per la coltivazione di soia destinata al bestiame. Una delle tribù più colpite è la Guarani Kaiowá nel Mato Grosso do Sul.
Para nós indígenas, antigamente as florestas que é a nossa casa. Quem começou a destruir a nossa aldeia é através da agropecuária. Então derrubaram as nossas matas, destruindo os animais, os rios.
Eu estou falando, agora vai plantar soja, aí depois vai passar veneno, né? Tudo coisa. Vai passar adubo também, vai cair tudo no rio. E nós revoltando no sotecorrar, para sustentar a nossa família. Né?
So there was actually a report that came out in 2018, and they found that the world's top 5 livestock corporations now release more annual greenhouse gas emissions than ExxonMobil, Shell and BP. It is crazy when you think about it, because the EU is spending £24 billion of taxpayers' money on livestock farming each year. And this is at a time when we are facing an ecological collapse and we drastically need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's no surprise that people are asking a lot of questions now about the fact that there seem to be some serious conflicts of interest going on here.
There's some very heavy lobbying going on of government, and I think that happens throughout the world. And it's just a historic thing that needs to be, I think, rebalanced.
As I've mentioned to you over the phone, I've worked with a number of large livestock companies around the world. So the way it works is that a representative from pays us usually up to €500,000. We then target the relevant politicians from different governments around the world, and motions are made to pass legislation in favour of the company's business strategies. For environmental policy, we can be very persuasive in order to abolish or heavily relax environmental regulations in government, so our clients have more freedom in their work. The other day we managed to kill proposed legislation that would have had a huge impact on the industry based on a report from the UNFAO. The industry is just concerned with growth, but the environmental data that's coming out now, it's really making that difficult for them.
Today, democracy does not always function as well as it should because of the huge influence that agribusiness corporations and livestock producers in particular exercise on decision-making.
A former director of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, Dr. Samuel Jutzi, warned as far back as 2010 that interventions by agribusiness lobbyists were blocking reforms that would offer better standards for human health and preserving the environment. Big animal agribusiness corporations and food producers' influence over political decisions about the regulation of their industry has long been a concern for campaigners who see the narrow interests of the industry taking widespread control.
If we have any doubt about how powerful this influence is, we can recall that, for example, when the Advisory Committee on Dietary Guidelines in the US made recommendations to the US government as to how dietary guidelines should be shaped, they were blocked by this very powerful lobby of agribusiness interests.
Nel 2013 la FAO ha rilasciato un rapporto chiamato Tackling Climate Change Through Livestock. Esso afferma che l'allevamento di bestiame è responsabile delle emissioni di gas a effetto serra più di tutti i mezzi di trasporto messi assieme. Un numero crescente di scienziati ritiene che l'impatto dell'agricoltura animale sia di fatto anche peggio di quanto dichiarato nel rapporto della FAO.
There are close ties between the research organisations and government policy and industry. It's very pervasive because livestock industries depend on government policies that support them.
The FAO report was prepared within the FAO by specialists of agriculture and livestock production, not by specialists of the environmental issues associated with agricultural production. I believe that a more serious concern, of course, is that the International Meat Association was involved in preparing the report, which does raise the question of the independence with which the study was prepared.
Government policy in that regard is not for the benefit of the land, it's for the benefit of the industry.
In tale rapporto la FAO si è associata a Paesi membri, ONG e molte altre organizzazioni, tra cui la Federazione Europea dei Produttori di Mangimi, la Federazione Casearia Internazionale, il Consiglio Internazionale delle Carni, la Commissione Internazionale delle Uova e il Consiglio Internazionale del Pollame. In una industria che vale più di $1 trilione, non sono forse queste le istituzioni a perderci di più da un compromettente rapporto scientifico contro l'agricoltura animale? In pochi conoscono meglio l'oceano della dottoressa Sylvia Earle. È stata la prima donna a diventare scienziato capo dell'Amministrazione Nazionale per l'Oceano e l'Atmosfera negli Stati Uniti e detiene il record per aver passato più tempo a camminare sul fondale marino in profondità.
When I was a child, the idea of a dead zone in the ocean was not even in our vocabulary. But in the 20th century, as agriculture began to greatly expand, the areas around the coast began to show signs of wear and tear. The first, most notorious spotlight area, I think, was off the Gulf of Mexico. And it has simply grown over the years, an annual phenomenon that is coincident with the application of massive amounts of fertilizer.
Milioni di chilometri quadrati destinati alla coltivazione del mangime per il bestiame sono spruzzati con fertilizzanti azotati. L'azoto scorre via dai campi, finendo prima nei fiumi e poi negli oceani. L'acqua ricca di azoto stimola un'eccessiva crescita di alghe, così immensa da essere visibile dallo spazio. Le alghe privano l'acqua dell'ossigeno, con la conseguente morte della vita marina. Poiché la domanda di carne è cresciuta, le zone a basso contenuto di ossigeno sono in continuo aumento.
There are hundreds of dead zones that have developed all around the coastlines of the world. And Okay, people say, that's too bad for the fish. So sorry, fish. But we need to understand that what we do to the ocean, we're doing to ourselves. I want others to see and to see for themselves. This is all we've got, this little blue miracle.
Alcuni pensano che sostituire la carne con il pesce avrà un effetto benefico sul pianeta. Niente di più falso. Se l'oceano muore, allora noi umani moriremo con esso, visto che metà dell'aria che respiriamo viene generata dall'oceano. Come riportato nella rivista scientifica Nature, abbiamo perso quasi il 90% di tutti i grandi pesci dell'oceano dagli anni 50. Uno degli studi più approfonditi mai condotti sul mercato del pesce, sempre dalla rivista Nature, afferma che al tasso di pesca attuale, la pesca mondiale è destinata a crollare in meno di 30 anni. Secondo l'IPBES, l'organo intergovernativo che valuta lo stato della nostra biodiversità, la principale causa di estinzione della vita marina è la pesca. La nostra voglia di pesce sta eliminando la vita dagli oceani.
Today we have agreed on fishing opportunities for European fishermen worth more than 5 billion euros and benefiting more than 50,000 fishermen. The catches agreed today will continue to make the European fishing industry highly profitable also in 2019.
La Norvegia, un bellissimo paese con paesaggi mozzafiato, è anche un luogo che nasconde segreti oscuri. La Norvegia è uno dei maggiori esportatori mondiali di pesce d'allevamento, un'industria che vale miliardi di euro per l'economia del paese. Poiché gran parte delle popolazioni ittiche dell'oceano hanno quasi raggiunto l'estinzione, i pescatori si rivolgono all'acquacoltura per coltivare il pesce in un ambiente controllato. La Norvegia produce più salmone e merluzzo d'allevamento di qualsiasi altro paese al mondo. Circa il 70% del pesce che mangiamo oggi proviene da allevamenti ittici. Poiché migliaia di pesci sono stipati in gabbie marine molto piccole, malattie e parassiti si diffondono facilmente e rappresentano un enorme problema per l'industria. Di conseguenza, pesticidi, disinfettanti e antibiotici sono ampiamente utilizzati per tenere il pesce in vita, abbastanza a lungo da poter essere venduto. Per liberare il pesce dai parassiti, le imbarcazioni di pompaggio risucchiano il pesce in un'enorme pulitrice. I pesci vengono pompati nel sistema e vengono riscaldati ad alte temperature o immersi in una soluzione chimica che rimuove la maggior parte dei parassiti prima di essere rigettati nelle acque. I pesci sono immersi in sostanze chimiche come il perossido di idrogeno e l'azametifos per uccidere i parassiti e le malattie e alimentati con sostanze chimiche quali teflubenzuron, emamectina e diflobenzuron, che per loro natura sono tossici. I ricercatori hanno rilevato che tracce di prodotti chimici possono finire nei pesci e di conseguenza nei nostri piatti. E questo vale per il pesce d'allevamento in tutto il mondo. Taryn Bishop, un'attivista ambientale, sta per incontrare i Guerrieri Verdi, un'organizzazione di conservazione con sede a Bergen, sulla costa occidentale norvegese. I Guerrieri Verdi indagano sulle pratiche devastanti dell'allevamento ittico sull'ecosistema locale e stanno portando Taryn a vedere il lato oscuro degli allevamenti subacquei. Un apposito sommergibile permette loro di vedere il fondale sotto le gabbie. Lungo tutto il fondo dell'oceano giace uno spesso strato di melma, costituita da escrementi di pesce, batteri e mangimi. Il fango è pieno di pesticidi aggiunti al mangime e recenti ricerche hanno dimostrato che l'enorme quantità di pesticidi aggiunti all'ecosistema marino di tutto il mondo sta avendo un effetto devastante sulla naturale biodiversità degli oceani. La melma rilascia anche grandi quantità di metano, che provoca surriscaldamento globale. Secondo i ricercatori dell'Università di Oxford, alcuni tipi di acquacoltura rilasciano più metano degli allevamenti di carne. Liv Holmfjord è a capo della direzione norvegese della pesca, che non solo è responsabile della regolamentazione dell'industria ittica del paese, ma possiede anche azioni di una delle più grandi aziende ittiche in Norvegia. Molti gruppi di conservazione vedono in questo un grande conflitto di interessi. Holmfjord ha accettato di incontrare Taryn per rispondere alle domande sugli allevamenti ittici norvegesi.
Well, fish farming is quite a new industry in Norway. It started back in the 1960s with some local entrepreneurs starting with hobby, and it's grown until it's a billion euro industry today. And seafood is the second largest export industry in Norway, and fish farming accounts for 2/3 of the export value of seafood.
So recently, we found out that you also have shares in one of the largest fish farm companies in Norway. Do you not feel that that's a conflict of interest?
Of course, there could be a conflict of interest. But this is a fact that's been known since before I got this position, and I've been open about it. I'm not involved in the business from day to day or at any. So it's, and if there's, we have, and I have. Sorry, do you have to start over again? Hva heter det for noe da? So all the decisions that I made will either be for the whole industry, not especially for this fish farm, or it's only an advice to the politicians, and the politicians are setting the limits and the actual regulations. So if there's an actual case handling regarding this company, then I will step aside.
When on a few jobs, and I was working here over the years as a diver, we used to be around the fish farms cleaning the dead, deceased fish from the nets.
and fixing the nets, etc. after storms. And on occasion we'd seen some of the boats coming in to clean the lice off them. There's quite a lot of dead fish, you know, diseased or they've died, but it's a lot of pink mush, you know, not healthy. Look, having seen what I've seen and worked on the various sites round about where I've been in Scotland, I wouldn't eat farmed salmon. No, I would have. pretty rank.
Salmon is marketed as healthy. It's also marketed in a very devious way, deceptive way, that they think it's a wild product. So it's a fake product, it's a fatty product, it's contaminated, it's marketed as healthy, but it's not. So salmon, if you see salmon, alarm bells should start ringing.
It's pretty grim when you dive down to the bottom of the cages because, you know, we always see the bottom full of dead fish. And it's basically because many of these fish are so diseased, so parasite-ridden and laden with chemicals that they become sick and they live out their sad, short lives, basically looking like zombies. You know, you don't see this when you go to the restaurant or the supermarket, but this is basically what a lot of the fish actually look like before it ends up on our plates. So tonight, Don wanted to show us how much of the farmed fish actually dies because of the very unnatural and unsanitary ways that they are kept. And they have rows of very large metal containers that they are constantly filling up with the dead fish. And I have to say that the smell as we get closer is actually pretty disgusting.
So this is the sordid side of salmon farming in Scotland. This is the dirty secrets the industry don't want you to see. This is disease-ridden farmed salmon. It's 15 to 20% fat. That's where the contaminants, the cancer-causing contaminants, PCBs, dioxins, and the artificial colorings are. So this is something to be avoided at all costs. This is the salmon farm just here. We got freedom information, data from the Scottish Environment Protection Agency showing the use of over 50 tons of formaldehyde, not just at this site but other sites across Scotland. Is formaldehyde may cause cancer, suspected of causing genetic defects, toxic if swallowed, may cause respiratory irritation, causes damage to organs. Do not breathe.
One of the fish farm workers told us that the workers come down to the farm early in the morning, spraying the chemicals into the fish cages. So they're obviously spraying something down there in the water. The guy who gave us the tip-off said that toxic chemicals are widely used across Scotland, including formaldehyde and also hydrogen peroxide. And these are supposed to treat the diseases and lice problems which are both rampant across the fish farms. You know, these are not chemicals that you want in your body. Whatever he's spraying must be pretty powerful if he needs to wear a full protective chemical suit and a face mask.
Con l'oceano che funge da discarica di 7 miliardi di persone e con le aziende che riempiono i pesci di mangimi chimici, mangiare pesce non è mai stato così tossico.
You know, our oceans have become humanity's sewers. Everything eventually flows into the sea. So if you had a, time machine that go back before the Industrial Revolution, it's a different story. But now, the highest levels of many of these persistent organic pollutants, we're talking about, DDT and PCBs and dioxins, the highest levels in our food supply are found in the aquatic food chain. Fish are not the safest choice anymore.
So Tony, it's great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for coming.
Not at all. Thank you. A pleasure being here. So I wanted to ask you if you could share with us what exactly it was you began to feel when you realized something was going wrong.
I was exhausted more than usual, and then I was losing short-term memory, and that scared the hell out of me. And then I tore my rotator cuffs in a really intense snowboarding accident. And the doctor said, "Do you want to do your metals test?" And I said, I got my amalgams out 25 years ago. He goes, "There's so many metals in the environment, you should do it." So I did. I get a phone call a week later, and I said to my assistant, "Just have him send the report." And he said, "No, it's an emergency. He has to speak to you." And it's like, no one wants to hear that. And so I called him up, and he said, "Tony, I showed your blood tests. You have extreme mercury poisoning. On a 0 to 5 scale, which is what we measure, 5 being toxic, you're 123. The doctor said, how long has this man been in the hospital?" And I just got off stage. So I said, I can't understand this. So I went out, and they thought, maybe someone was trying to poison me because the number was so high. And I was very disciplined. I was a vegan for 12 years, and then I just went salad fish. And they brought the medical group out here, and they looked at it, and I found this man named Dr. Shade, who's the only guy who has an ideation process where you can see where the mercury came from, and it was fish. Mm-hmm. It's been 3 years, and I had some severe moments. It burned a hole in my esophagus, and I literally collapsed. I lost a third of my blood supply. I could have died. I lost half my hemoglobin.
People begin to lose their hair, their memory. They lose their memories, as you were doing, as you noticed. But they can also have headaches. They can complain of fatigue. They can also have depression. What we're seeing now is with the toxic environmental exposure, and especially with the mercury, methyl mercury in fish, is that everyone has got to be careful because the levels are going up.
Udo, tell me, because your specialty is in this, how do you get the fish oils that we all need for the brain and for the body if we can't have fish? What do you suggest?
Well, we used to get them from fish oils.
Yes.
But we can actually get them from vegetables. Flax is the richest source of omega-3 that everybody thinks should come from fish oil. If you get enough of that as starting material, your body will make what the fish oils make, and it'll be clean.
Many people take fish oils or have fish for the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. And you have to ask yourself the question, well, where do the fish get them from? And it turns out they get them from the algae in the ocean. They get them from plant food. So if you want the purest form of the long-chain, ready-made omega-3 fatty acids, the best way of doing that is simply to take an algae supplement, because then you've got the purest form of it and you don't have the extra risks of having the toxins and the heavy metals and the saturated fat and the cholesterol that you would get from eating a fish.
Uno studio peer review di ricercatori della Scripps Institution of Oceanography dell'Università di San Diego ha intrapreso uno dei più grandi studi sugli inquinanti del pesce. Gli scienziati hanno trovato contaminanti tossici nei pesci degli oceani di tutto il pianeta.
Nobody would go to the nearest body of water and put in like a cup and drink the water. You're basically getting the concentrated toxins if we're eating fish.
I nostri oceani sono stati anche riempiti di plastica. Data la vastità degli oceani, è una sfida per qualsiasi scienziato capire con precisione da dove provenga la maggior parte della plastica. La grande macchia di spazzatura del Pacifico, che copre un'area di circa 1,6 milioni di chilometri quadrati, può fornire un'opportunità unica per capire meglio il crescente problema delle microplastiche in mare. Un team di scienziati dell'organizzazione Ocean Cleanup ha studiato la macchia per diverso tempo ed è rimasto sorpreso nello scoprire che la maggior parte delle plastiche nella macchia non proviene da vecchie cannucce o bottiglie di plastica usate, ma da migliaia di tonnellate di attrezzi da pesca scartati, disgregati dal mare in trilioni di pezzi di microplastiche. Uno studio recentemente pubblicato sulla rivista Nature ha rilevato che circa l'80% della plastica nel Pacifico è costituita da attrezzi da pesca scartati. Molti scienziati ritengono che una delle cose più grandi che noi possiamo fare è eliminare il consumo di pesce e passare a una dieta vegetale.
At least half of the plastic in the sea today comes from discarded or lost fishing gear. Because all those nets, all those lines, all that stuff, it's just become a plasticized ocean. But we have a chance. We have a chance right now to change our eating habits.
There's an estimate that there's over 5 trillion tons of plastic currently floating in the ocean. It's absolutely everywhere. Everywhere we look, we found microplastics, whether it's at the polar regions, in remote islands. Also, if we're looking on the surface or the seabed, and everywhere in between, we find microplastics. We've also found microplastics in just about every animal group that we've looked in. We've been sampling for microplastics for quite a while now, and we found that there's 27 times more bits of plastic than there are fish larvae.
I microplancton vivono negli oceani. Sono organismi filtranti. Quando i ricercatori aggiungono microplastiche nell'ambiente del plancton, li osservano costantemente ingerire le particelle di plastica. Ignaro che quelle particelle sono costituite da sostanze tossiche, il plancton li consuma indiscriminatamente. I ricercatori osservano come le sostanze chimiche si accumulino all'interno degli organi di queste piccole creature marine. Il plancton tossico viene poi mangiato dai pesci più grandi e i ricercatori hanno scoperto che gran parte dei pesci che noi mangiamo ha bioaccumulato queste sostanze chimiche nella loro carne. Uno studio dell'Università di Plymouth ha rilevato che oltre un terzo dei pesci esaminati conteneva microplastiche. Mentre mangiamo il pesce contaminato, ingeriamo le stesse sostanze chimiche tossiche nei nostri corpi e ricerche recenti hanno notato un accumulo tossico simile nell'uomo.
Our scientists tell us we're now in the 6th extinction event of life on this Earth. It doesn't even make the headlines. No one even knows about it.
Saya kesemai, polo puni mati kana, ati mengkoni mati kana. Nani ke, yalo siapa ni te? Sia hayu temene kati sebenarnya. Tony na waku keban. Thera ate nekuni. Saya tidak di saya metani. Saya nunu ada yang nunu ni. Saya potolnya nunu. Thera ati meko. Ayu romera. Thera na pekas na henikan hacker. Atedi tali haba. Nekuni saya kepu pasta di hoka. Saya lah yang negara waikna. Ni nane neno kapan. Tahu apa ni ti? Thera ati meko. Nyalo balik apa? Na yuk kepu ni kere. Thera ni kalau ne nyasa dia ni. Tahu apa ni? Ni kalau ne. Na waikna. Oti peti apa ni?
We've had 5 mass extinction events on this planet in 450 million years. Let me be clear on this. The last time we had an extinction event of this magnitude was 65 million years ago.
It's incredibly sad to realize just how many species, both in the oceans and on land, that we're losing at the moment. And It's up to all of us to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future.
Today, over 26,000 species are currently threatened with extinction, and the most important driver of that is our use of land for agriculture.
Over time, livestock have been a major driver of biodiversity loss.
Some have predicted that by 2045, the species loss will be so great that we won't recover. The Earth will suffer ecological collapse. And the biggest thing you and I can do is change our diet.
Alcuni scienziati chiamano questo fenomeno annientamento biologico. Secondo la rivista Science of the Total Environment della Florida International University, l'allevamento di bestiame è la causa principale della perdita di biodiversità. Secondo uno studio pubblicato nella rivista Science, se il mondo intero passasse a una dieta esclusivamente vegetale, libereremmo più del 75% della terra arabile al mondo e molte delle foreste precedentemente abbattute per l'allevamento potrebbero essere ripristinate. Esistono molte iniziative al mondo che fanno proprio questo. Ecosia, un motore di ricerca online simile a Google, utilizza i ricavi realizzati dalla pubblicità per aiutare le comunità locali a ripiantare gli alberi. Mauricio, uno dei forestali di Ecosia, lavora duramente per ripiantare la foresta pluviale in Brasile.
Plantei a minha primeira árvore, eu tinha 5 anos de idade. Eu nem imaginava que 20 anos depois, esse esforço tão pequeno teria virado uma das iniciativas que mais plantou árvores na história do Brasil. Foram mais de 2,5 milhões de árvores, 2.000 hectares plantados, muitas áreas preservadas pela ação de combate a incêndios florestais.
Gli alberi danno vita al mondo. Quando piantiamo un albero, seminiamo i semi del nostro futuro su questo pianeta. Il più recente studio sull'impatto ambientale di ciò che mangiamo è costituito da una rivista creata da un team internazionale di ricercatori. Questo importante studio, guidato dal dottor Marco Springman dell'Università di Oxford in Inghilterra, ha constatato che per poter mantenere le temperature al di sotto della pericolosa soglia di 2 gradi Celsius stabilita nell'accordo sul clima di Parigi, nei paesi ad alto reddito bisogna ridurre drasticamente il nostro consumo di carne di circa l'80%.
Policymakers have been very reluctant to address the livestock issue. It's entirely out of keeping with the urgency of the crisis that we're facing.
Hi, Otto Brockway for Brockstar Films. This is a question for Commissioner Hogan. The scientists at Oxford University have been very clear that livestock farming has a far greater impact than plant-based farming. With this in mind, would it not be common sense to reduce the billions in subsidy payments to livestock farming in Europe and offer them to plant-based farming instead as an incentive to a much more sustainable food system?
We have made our proposals based on protecting the farmers because they are, unlike you and I, they're out in all sorts of weathers and in all sorts of market risks. And you and I may not know anything about that because this is their lives. They're producing high quality food for us all so that we can have this particular good quality products available to us at all times. Sometimes under local conditions like organic, more times it's conventional farming. So we provide financial support at the moment for that. And it's a public good that's not always recognised. But the movement of our policy is in the direction of our farmers being centrally involved in providing more public goods. And if you want to do anything in life, you have to pay people. Sometimes I understand that there's a moral obligation and there's people of principle. But most of the time, 99% of the time, they have to get paid. So as professionals that we're expecting to provide good quality food and do more on public goods, we pay our farmers. This is the decision that we make at political level.
Livestock emit methane and nitrous oxide. Now, most people, when they think of climate change, they think of CO2, carbon dioxide, which is a very potent global warming gas. But methane is 25 times more potent per molecule when it's released than CO2. And nitrous oxide is 298 times more potent per molecule than CO2. These are very powerful global warming gases.
So today we have a very special camera called a hyperspectral imaging camera, and it basically enables us to be able to see gases that would be otherwise invisible to the naked eye. And today we're looking at methane gas. Methane is a gas that is being produced by cows when they belch.
Il metano, insieme agli altri gas, dal 1750 ha causato un terzo del riscaldamento globale. Il bestiame è la più grande fonte di metano che possiamo controllare. Forti tagli alle emissioni di metano rallenterebbero il riscaldamento globale entro 15-25 anni, rendendolo il mezzo più efficace per i prossimi anni. Per dimostrare i diversi potenziali di riscaldamento dei gas climatici, possiamo citare un esperimento noto come esperimento di assorbimento infrarosso. Qui vediamo 4 sculture di ghiaccio a forma di terra, ognuna nella propria camera stagna. Le camere rappresentano l'atmosfera che circonda il pianeta. Ciascuna ha un riscaldatore a infrarossi posto al di sopra, impostato a temperature identiche, e ognuna è poi riempita con un gas diverso. La prima camera viene riempita di aria normale che respiriamo ogni giorno. La seconda camera viene riempita di anidride carbonica, un noto gas di riscaldamento climatico. La terza camera viene riempita di metano, un gas associato all'agricoltura animale, e la quarta camera viene riempita di protossido di azoto, un altro gas associato all'agricoltura animale. Col tempo notiamo che la scultura di ghiaccio nella camera di CO2 si scioglie leggermente rispetto all'aria normale. Ma nello stesso lasso di tempo, le sculture nelle camere di metano e protossido di azoto si sciolgono rapidamente, poiché la temperatura interna aumenta notevolmente rispetto all'aria normale e all'anidride carbonica. 16 ore dopo, i risultati sono evidenti. Vediamo chiaramente che il metano e il protossido di azoto, i due principali sottoprodotti dell'agricoltura animale, sono potenti gas di riscaldamento climatico. Dei circa 70 miliardi di animali terrestri allevati ogni anno in tutto il mondo per il consumo umano, quasi il 90% sono polli. Un problema emergente è che il consumo di pollo è ora in aumento. Il pollo ha un impatto ambientale inferiore rispetto alla carne rossa, ma oltre il 90% del pollo al mondo viene da allevamenti intensivi, con effetti devastanti sul nostro pianeta. Se confrontiamo le calorie proteiche equivalenti per la carne e le proteine vegetali come i ceci, il pollo arreca meno danni all'ambiente delle carni rosse comunemente consumate. Eppure causa 40 volte più riscaldamento climatico per caloria di proteine rispetto ai ceci e usa 50 volte la quantità d'acqua.
We know that if we would shift from ruminant meats to other meats, then we probably would reduce our footprint just from that particular product by about a factor of 10, which is quite a bit. But if you compare that with how much you would reduce your footprint if you went to plant-based products, that is about a factor of 100. And that's the reason why shifting towards more plant-based diets has such a big impact, because we're really talking about different scales here.
Ma uno studio condotto dai ricercatori dell'Università di Oxford ha rilevato che di fatto le carni biologiche o convenzionali differiscono ben poco in termini di emissioni di gas a effetto serra.
So in our data we didn't find big differences between organic and conventional across multiple indicators. What we did find is that no matter how you produce animal products, even the lowest impact forms of production still create higher emissions and use more land than typical vegetable proteins. So that's saying something really important. That's saying that even if you go into the shops and try and purchase sustainable meat or dairy, it's always going to be better to purchase vegetable proteins instead.
Ogni anno il governo americano usa circa 20 milioni di dollari per sovvenzionare la frutticoltura e l'orticoltura, ma la produzione di carne e latticini ottiene ben 38 miliardi dal governo. Si stima che il costo annuale al contribuente americano per malattie legate al consumo di carne e latticini si aggiri intorno ai 314 miliardi di dollari.
When you cram, tens of thousands of animals in these cramped, filthy, unhygienic conditions, basically live atop their feces, it's just like a breeding ground. Animal to human diseases that arise because of the way we're now treating animals, whether it's these live animal markets in East Asia, whether it's the bushmeat trade. And the concern is that with enough spins at genetic roulette on these swine factory farms, these chicken factory farms, we're gonna, end up with one of these viruses that's not only deadly to chickens, but can jump and transmit human to human and cause the next human pandemic.
The risk of large-scale factory farmings increases the risk or the likelihood that we might have a pandemic, particularly of influenza in the future.
This pandemic has been very severe. But this is not necessarily the big one.
L'influenza suina, che ha ucciso più di 500.000 di persone, pare aver avuto origine negli allevamenti di suini. Si ritiene che l'AIDS e l'Ebola provengano dal consumo di animali selvatici, mentre la MERS dai cammelli e dal latte e dalla carne di cammello. Si ritiene che la SARS si sia diffusa dai mercati di animali vivi, così come la recente pandemia di Covid-19, e che l'influenza aviaria provenga da allevamenti di polli e da mercati di animali vivi, e pare che il virus del morbillo abbia avuto origine dalle mucche d'allevamento.
People know now what a global pandemic feels like. They've seen the effects. They will be feeling the effects for many years to come. And this is a chance, I think, an opportunity to point out that this particular route of infection is a very concerning one.
L'Organizzazione Mondiale della Sanità ha annunciato che l'era post-antibiotica è vicina, un'era in cui un semplice graffio sul braccio può diventare fatale. E i nostri miracolosi antibiotici salvavita stanno diventando inutili a causa dell'uso eccessivo non per uso umano, ma per i miliardi di animali d'allevamento.
So having been a butcher for 6 years, one thing I know is that if people knew what happened in the production of their food, they wouldn't eat meat. So one of the things that we would hit every day was pus nodules, tumors, cysts. It was something that we would hit on a daily basis. Having worked in a supermarket chain, I saw this firsthand every single day. So here's one that's running along the shoulder blade. Oh. Yeah. That is what I remember in the butchery. It comes out like a thick toothpaste. I remember that every single day.
That's interesting to hear you had that experience all the way over there, because in the UK, exactly the same.
Yeah.
We would see that on a daily basis. But those people who say it's not my butcher does this, they need to open their eyes, because if their butcher's being honest with them, we know. Yeah. We both know. And any honest butcher's going to admit it. They're not going to want to tell the public because it's going to affect their business. Yeah. But it is a fact.
And me working in multiple butcheries, I saw these common trends across the board. So I know that it wasn't just isolated to the one that I was working in. It was across the board for me.
People need to reconnect with what they're eating, and the whole process that we're talking about here of how that food gets to them is hidden from them, and it's hidden for a reason. Because if they saw it, it would most definitely make them want to think harder about what they're eating.
Mentre gli oceani e l'atmosfera si riscaldano, i cicli dell'acqua cominciano a cambiare.
Climate change changes the water cycles of the planet. The heat that's being generated is forcing the precipitation into the clouds, so we're getting more concentrated precipitation in our clouds and more dramatic, extreme, and unpredictable water events all over the world.
Nella regione settentrionale dell'isola del Pacifico di Taiwan, gli Atayal vivono in montagna. Taiwan non è estranea al tempo estremo, ma negli ultimi anni la forza e frequenza dei tifoni sono aumentate. Ciò ha avuto effetti devastanti sul popolo Atayal e il loro modo di vivere.
Joro laki ku cipok na toki ga ya ba utukai menyak nak sya ga joro bala menyak ne. Ini pejuh menyak na wi. Kabaw na ka siga dokah tananak mengedung. Naga ta nyan yakah na orasyo. Yakah lungan dalah, lungun dalah nyan mah yakah.
Gran parte del mondo è vittima di inondazioni estreme, ma in molti luoghi sta accadendo il contrario. Gran parte del mondo sta entrando in estrema siccità, che sta distruggendo migliaia di tonnellate di raccolto e gli agricoltori faticano a procurarsi sufficiente acqua per i campi.
I'm definitely worried about the future of our farm. I think we're seeing, many more swings in climate than we've seen in the past. But we want to use all the land that we have to grow food, but we haven't been able to just because of the shortages of water. It'll have an impact on food supply and prices and availability, and so estimates now are between 500,000 to over 1 million acres of farmland that'll come out of production in California.
Almeria, nel sud della Spagna, è sede di 31.000 ettari di aziende orticole al coperto. Almeria produce metà di frutta e verdura in Europa, una componente essenziale nell'approvvigionamento alimentare del continente. È preoccupante che la Spagna sia vittima di siccità da 20 anni, una siccità che gli esperti climatici ritengono essere strettamente legata al cambiamento climatico.
In terms of water, the truth is that the drought in Spain has become a complete catastrophe. Our harvests are decreasing in massive quantities. Last year, in the area we are now, there was almost no harvest. People don't realize the food system is collapsing.
Come risultato di questo cambiamento climatico globale, la siccità in Africa si è aggravata. I fiumi e i laghi che forniscono acqua potabile a milioni di persone cominciano a prosciugarsi. Mentre scoppiano nuovi conflitti per le risorse in diminuzione, stiamo assistendo all'inizio di un esodo di massa verso nord di gente che lotta per sopravvivere. Questi profughi climatici sono disposti a rischiare tutto pur di raggiungere quelle che considerano le coste sicure dell'Europa. In risposta a questa moderna migrazione di massa, la Spagna ha costruito un enorme muro che corre lungo il suo confine meridionale a Melilla. Migliaia di profughi stanno cominciando ad arrampicarsi sulle recinzioni di confine e sono decisamente troppi per la polizia spagnola. Pare che questo modello migratorio sia destinato a crescere ed è sempre più chiaro che il mondo non è preparato ad affrontare il problema.
Osbal, Andral. Osguiger bit Mogulpurn.
deserto del Gobi in Mongolia si espande sempre più nel paese, come una bestia che sbrana tutto ciò che incontra, molti dei laghi che sostengono la gente e la fauna selvatica si sono prosciugati. Se i laghi continuano a scomparire, la gente è costretta a lasciare la propria casa e raggiungere terre lontane.
Уул ус тэгшхэн сайхан байсан цаг саяхан санагдах юм. Хөгшчүүл хангаа дэлхийн нэг л өөр болоод байна гэцгээж байна. Монголчууд байгаль дэлхийдээ дасан зогцож амьдэрсаар ирсэн. Гэхдээ байгаль орчин арай л дэндүү огцом хувьсж байна уу та гэж. Энэ дэлхий дээр ам өрсөж үлдэхийн тулд их л төвчээртэй хатуужилтай байх хэрэгтэй болох нь дээ.
A lot of people talk about how much fresh water we use for hydrofracking. 700 billion gallons globally is wasted on fracking. So 700 billion gallons. Sounds like a lot, but animal agriculture, the production of animals that we use for meat around the globe, uses 70 trillion gallons of fresh water a year, hundreds of thousands of times as much as fracking. And we give the cows and the chickens the good stuff, right? They don't get the Flint, Michigan, lead-tainted condoms floating in it water. They get the top shelf stuff because we don't want to screw up our sausage links. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, oh, here's the part. I'm a vegetarian and pigs are people too, man. But no, let's ignore how the animals are treated in our factory torture farming. Let's pretend they're treated amazing for just a minute. It's like a celebrity backstage at the Oscars. They're just being fawned over and they get swag bags with free Apple Watches. Point is, you should still be upset about this because animal agriculture is killing us. And corporate media is fantastically pathetic on this topic. They never mention meat production. They never mention that a quarter pounder takes 660 gallons of fresh water to create. That's the equivalent of showering for 2 months.
So one usually underestimated impact of livestock production is the huge amounts of fresh water required for that production to be maintained and to be increased.
The problem is that in many places water is being used much faster than the natural renewal rates. Overall, in the world, 1.8 billion people are living in areas with severe water scarcity. The livestock sector is the single biggest water user in the world. 1/3 of the water use in the world is being used for producing animal products, meat and dairy. And it's not because those animals drink so much, it's really because there's a lot of water required to make the feed for the animals.
If we want enough fresh water for future generations, water alone dictates that we must change our diet away from meat and dairy.
In tutto il mondo vediamo prove di un cambiamento globale verso alimenti vegetali e questo ci dà speranza. Nel 2021 un record di 580.000 persone si è iscritta alla campagna Veganuary del Regno Unito e si stima che più di 4 milioni di persone si identifichino come vegani in tutto il Regno Unito. In Canada si stima che il 10% della popolazione sia vegana o vegetariana e negli Stati Uniti oltre il 50% degli chef ha aggiunto piatti vegani al menù, con un aumento del 600% dello stile di vita vegano negli ultimi 3 anni.
A few years ago, it was quite a challenge to get hold of good vegan food, but today we're pretty much spoiled for choice and there are vegan options everywhere.
What do you think? It tastes like a normal hot dog. Is it a normal hot dog? Like, as in, like, or is this like plant-based or something?
So it is actually plant-based, yeah. So everything.
It's really nice. I prefer it because I don't really eat meat that much, so this is good.
Okay.
Well, I like meat and it tastes good.
Yeah.
For not being meat.
Would you be happy with that?
Yeah, I'd be stoked. I love meat too much. So I feel like if I went plant-based, I'd miss it. But if this like stuff tastes the same, yeah, I'd be very happy with this.
Nice messy fingers.
It is, yeah. Sounds good burger. Thank you.
Would it interest you to know that that's completely plant-based?
And I wouldn't know. So that I would definitely, wow, that's a winner. Yeah, I'm amazed.
If burgers always tasted like that, would you be happy to just not eat a beef burger again?
Yeah, no, I got good veg, yeah.
Yeah?
I'd like you to tell me which one of these nuggets is plant-based and which one is real meat.
Okay. It's very hard to say which one is.
They taste exactly the same, honestly.
These are not the chicken.
No.
That's interesting.
Which one of this is animal meat and which one of this is plant-based? Meat or not meat? You're not sure? You're not sure?
You're not, yeah, I'm not sure.
Meat. You? Yes. Are wrong. Oh, okay. Okay.
But you think the second one was chicken?
Yeah.
The second one was actually plant-based.
No way.
Yeah, and the first one was chicken. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't. I couldn't have guessed that. I definitely thought the first one. Yeah, definitely.
It seems that changing what we eat to a more sustainable diet can also coincidentally be very beneficial to our health. There is a growing understanding that we can actually prevent, and in many cases even reverse, some of our most common diseases, all through a shift towards a whole food vegan diet.
Humans can survive on many different kinds of diet, but many decades of research has now shown us that the best way of not just surviving, but truly thriving is on a whole food plant-based diet.
A human can be healthy on a plant-based diet without any animal products. The major dietetic associations around the world, including the British Dietetic Association, have produced statements to say exactly that a diet made up of whole plant foods is healthy for humans all stages of their life.
And not only can they be healthy, but they can restore or reclaim their health adopting a plant-based diet.
There are certain areas, certain populations around the world that have extraordinary health and longevity. For example, the largest number of centenarians, people that live over 100, these so-called blue zones.
What's really interesting about the blue zones, they actually have more centenarians than anywhere else in the world. And a centenarian is someone that lives at least 100 years. But what's really interesting about the blue zones is when people reach these advanced ages, they are still productive. So the blue zones have taught us a lot. And the bottom line is we really want to try to emulate what the people of the blue zones are doing.
Le 5 regioni conosciute come zone blu sono Okinawa in Giappone, Sardegna in Italia, Icaria in Grecia, Nicoya in Costa Rica e Loma Linda in California.
So the question is, well, what do they all have in common?
They have a predominantly plant-based diet. They have a diet rich in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, soy, lentils, chickpeas. They have a diet rich in all these nutrients, and that's one thing that they have in common.
So the EPIC study is the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition. It followed over 500,000 individuals from 10 European countries for more than 15 years. Those in the EPIC study that were eating predominantly plant-based or eating high levels of fruits and vegetables lived longer, had lower incidence of cancer and heart disease. About 2,500 of the individuals in the EPIC Oxford only ate plant food, so they were vegan. And even though they weren't the most healthy vegans or healthy plant eaters, you could show that these plant eaters were healthier. They had a lower incidence of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer.
From everything we have discovered on this journey, it seems that moving away from animal foods to plant-based foods instead can not only give us a whole host of amazing health benefits, but also gives us a chance to be able to leave a sustainable planet for future generations to come. Perhaps the single most meaningful change that we can make as individuals is ultimately deciding what ends up each day on our plates.
We are running out of time. The world community
must acknowledge that animal agriculture is the most destructive industry on our planet. We can't wait for government policies and other organizations to create a better life for ourselves. We need to stand up now and make our voices heard.
Globally, for the typical consumer, avoiding meat and dairy is probably the single biggest way to reduce your impact on Earth.
Without addressing what we eat, we simply won't make it.
This is a #1 priority. This is a next step in taking responsibility for our communities, our planet, our biosphere, our fellow species.
People say, what can I do as an individual? It feels overwhelming. Well, you can make individual choices. We all can. Our individual choices affect the collective choices. When you hear about airplanes and cars, and we're still going to use those things. But the choices we make in our diet, this agricultural business where we use animals as the primary source of protein, the one thing I think we can all do is, as individuals, is make our own individual choices, how we're going to live, how we're going to eat. Plant-based diet makes all the difference in the world. Just make some choices that are good for you, and being good for you will be good for the planet.
Questo pianeta è la nostra casa e sta a noi decidere cosa accadrà adesso. La storia ha dimostrato che quando siamo uniti in una causa comune possiamo fare grandi cose. Abbiamo l'opportunità di costruire un mondo in cui poter prosperare, ma abbiamo i minuti contati perché il tempo sta per scadere.